Hey everyone, we're going to get started in just 1 second. Thank you so much for joining our Truth Commission on Hunger and Housing, Truth Commission in the Capital Region. My name is Pauline. I use the pronoun she, her, hers. I'm one of the digital organizers for Labor Religion and also a cultural arts organizer with the New York State Poor People's Campaign. I think I'm going to pass it to my friend Joe.
Do you mind if I do some consecutive interpreting at this moment?
Please do.
Okay. Muchas gracias por unirse a la reunión de hoy. Mi nombre es Pauline. Bueno, yo soy el intérprete, estoy interpretando. Pauline dijo que ella es Pauline. Utilice los pronombres ella y les da la bienvenida a la reunión de hoy.
Welcome everyone to Hunger, Housing, and the Third Reconstruction, a Truth Commission in the Capital Region. My name is Reverend Joe Paparone. I'm the lead organizer with the Labor Religion Coalition of New York State and a coordinator with the New York State Poor People's Campaign. Just want to clarify a couple logistical things. We do have Spanish and ASL interpretation available. So if you are tuning in and you would like the Spanish interpretation, there should be a button at the bottom of your screen that says interpretation, and you can choose that link for Spanish, and ASL should be displayed throughout the entire program. Make sure we're all clear on that. And with that, we are live streaming this to Facebook, a number of different Facebook pages. We're really glad to have so many people tuning in. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Pauline to get us started with a song.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Joe. So we're going to sing a song by my friend and fellow New York State theomusicologist, Ana Hernandez, who wrote this song, Set It Right Again. We're going to set it right again. And with that spirit in mind, I'd like to do a little land acknowledgement. Right now, I am on Piscataway territory, but it might be nice for this moment to just think about the lands that we're all on and the first peoples that were on that land as we think about setting it right again. And the song goes like this. There's a great trouble in the land, and we're going to set it right again. So sing with me. We're getting where we fit in. Here we go. There's a great trouble in the land. We're gonna set it right again. There's a great trouble in the land. We're gonna set it right again. There's a great trouble in the land. We're gonna set it right again. We're gonna set it right again. Trouble's been brewing too many years. We're gonna set it right again. Trouble's been brewing too many years. We're gonna set it right again. Trouble's been brewing too many years. We're gonna set it right again. We're gonna set it right again. We need clean water and healthy food. We're gonna set it right again. We need clean water and healthy food. We're gonna set it right again. We need clean water and healthy food. We're gonna set it right again. We're gonna set it right again. We must have housing, we've a right to thrive. We're gonna set it right again. again. We must have housing, we've a right to thrive. We're gonna set it right again. We must have housing, we've a right to thrive. We're gonna set it right again. We're gonna set it right again. Trouble's been brewing too many years. We're gonna set it right again. Trouble's been brewing too many years. We're gonna set it right again. Trouble's been brewing too many years. We're gonna set it right again. We're gonna set it right again. People need healing all over the world, and we're gonna set it right again. People need healing all over the world. We're gonna set it right again. People need healing all over this world. We're gonna set it right again. We're gonna set it right again. Last time, there's great trouble in the land, and we're gonna set it right again. There's a great trouble in the land, and we're gonna set it right again. There's a great trouble in this land, and we're gonna set it right again. 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 Forward together, family.
Not one step back. Thank you so much, Pauline. Good evening, everyone. My name is Reverend West McNeil, and I'm the Executive Director of the Labor Religion Coalition of New York State and one of the tri-chairs of the New York State Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And I want to thank you all for being here this evening. Tonight is the second in a series of Truth Commission events that Labor Religion Coalition is holding across the state over the coming year in collaboration with the Poor People's Campaign and other partners. And I want to spend just a couple minutes introducing what we mean by Truth Commission. Truth Commissions and similar events where directly impacted people speak for ourselves about our conditions and our demands have been an important tool that's been used for decades by the network of organizations that's now taking up the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And in 2017, as part of the organizing towards the launch of the Poor People's Campaign, the Cairo Center spearheaded a national truth commission on the right not to be poor that had events around the country that lifted up the plight, fight, and insight of the poor and dispossessed. And what we mean by that is that these events are highlighting not just the pain or the injustice that we experience, but importantly, also the ways that people on the front lines of poverty and racism and militarism and ecological devastation are resisting and organizing and coming up with solutions to the problems that we face collectively. Here in New York, Labor Religion Coalition organized what we called the Truth Commission on Poverty in New York State in 2017 as part of that larger effort. And we had 3 hearings in Allegheny County and Schenectady and on Long Island, where we heard and saw really clearly how people across our state, upstate, downstate, in urban and rural and suburban communities, and from all kinds of backgrounds, were struggling against the same system that denied them things like housing and healthcare and living wage jobs and adequate food and more. And through that process, we began to build relationships and a shared analysis that helped lay a foundation for the Poor People's Campaign organizing in New York State that has continued since then. So now we're almost 5 years after that first series, and we're holding the second series of Truth Commission events around New York State to again continue to lift up the plight, fight, and insight of the poor and dispossessed, and to keep building and strengthening our connections to one another across different regions and across different areas of struggle. So the first event took place in October on Indigenous Peoples Day, and we partnered with the Shinnecock Nation on Eastern Long Island and heard really powerful testimony about the ongoing attacks on Indigenous land and sovereignty, as well as how the Shinnecock are organizing and resisting. And you can read more about that and watch clips from that event at our website, laborreligion.org/reports. Tonight, of course, we're turning our attention to the capital region and to struggles around food and housing insecurity. And then on February 22nd, we'll have our third Truth Commission that will focus on the Hudson Valley and the right to health. And you can stay tuned for more information about a fourth event that will be coming up in the spring in Western New York and looking at rural poverty and farm worker justice. As we are holding these Truth Commissions, the Poor People's Campaign is continuing to organize across New York State and the country around a platform of demands calling for a third Reconstruction. And this third Reconstruction is one that will take up the unfinished revolutionary work of the first Reconstruction following the Civil War and the second Reconstruction of the Civil Rights Movement to fully address poverty, systemic racism, militarism, and ecological devastation. Our demands for a third Reconstruction include things like guaranteed living wages and the right to unionize, an end to evictions and water and utility shutoffs, universal single-payer healthcare, honoring Indigenous treaty rights, slashing the military budget, ending mass incarceration, creating a clean energy economy, enacting comprehensive and just immigration reform, and much more. That's just a few of the demands that we have. And the fact that we have so many demands is one of the criticisms of our opponents. But we know that we have to organize in this way because the injustices and oppressions that our demands address are all interconnected, and we can't address them one by one. Instead, we have to build what Martin Luther King called a moral revolution of values. And we have to shift the whole orientation of our society around the needs and demands of the poor and dispossessed. Because when we do that, all of us, our whole society will be better off, morally and materially. As we say in the Poor People's Campaign, when we lift from the bottom, everybody rises. So with that in mind, as we listen tonight and throughout the series of Truth Commission events to particular struggles and insights based in particular places, we also hear echoes and connections to other struggles and to a much bigger movement across New York and the United States and indeed across the world. To build the movement that we need to win the third Reconstruction that we need, we have to break out of our isolation and recognize how our stories and struggles intersect. And we have to come together across our many differences that so often have been exploited by our opponents to keep us apart. We also have to learn and tell the truth, knowing that our culture is steeped in so many lies that deny or justify systemic racism, that blame the poor for poverty, or that claim that there isn't enough for all of us to have what we need. And so tonight's Truth Commission and the series of Truth Commissions is just one step in this larger project. And we're so grateful to you all for joining us and really look forward to continuing to build this movement together. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to the heart of our program tonight and hear testimonies. And for that, I'll first introduce Reverend Amari Tanyan Santos, who is the Executive Director of Schenectady Community Ministries and also happens to chair our board, the Labor Religion Coalition.
you, Wes. It is good to be here and to be part of the organizing and the hosting of this very important conversation. One of the gifts and opportunities in service that I have is to join in the capital region, living in land that used to be stewarded by the Mohawks in Albany, but serving, of the Mohicans, I should say, in Albany, but serving the good people of the city and the county of Schenectady, land that was stewarded by the Mohawks, and that were taken away from that land for centuries and recently came back, and the struggles that already brings into this very important conversation. I'm glad that we were able to identify several leaders to speak into this work. And the first person that will join us in conversation is Moline Gilmore, a resident of the Hamilton Hill neighborhood of Schenectady, worshiper at Refreshing Springs Community Church, a member of the board of Schenectady Community Ministries, somebody who throughout her life has done dedicated work in community organizing and in listening to the community, and brings an important perspective on issues of housing and issues of hunger in her many years of committed work, service, and accompaniment. So I'll lend this moment to Moline while and as she's coming on in the camera. I want to remind everybody that please share your comments, share your questions. Those of you who are on Zoom, that you could do it on the chat. Those of you that are on Twitter or Facebook, those are being looked at, and they will be collected and will be brought into the conversation. Again, welcome to this conversation. Welcome virtually to Schenectady, and Sister Gilmore will be speaking to us now.
Good evening. It certainly is a pleasure to meet with you. And I just want to briefly say that my testimony is a pleasure to be able to share it, as well as how it feels to be poor, hungry, and unhoused. I want to say praise be to God that that's not my testimony. Even though I was born in 1952 in the heart of Harlem, if we were poor, I didn't know it. Because my family, not just my nucleus family, but my entire family was very close knit. No one went without, and that's a blessing for us and for me. However, and that included everyone in my sphere of influence. Some of them couldn't say the same. After my schooling coming up here in Albany, at SUNY Albany, after that included, I took several jobs in the community in Albany, one of which was to manage a homeless shelter sponsored by our local Catholic charities here in Albany. It was at that point where I saw homelessness and poverty face to face. I had a background in pseudo social work. It wasn't enough to provide real life's lessons for my customers. As you know, reading a book isn't the same as reality. My assignment, however, allowed me to see life like I never saw it before. I saw it up close and definitely very personal. It taught me a lot about people in desperation and made me much more appreciative of my life's experiences. My assignment at the shelter, as well as my religious upbringing, let me know that we as a society, as Americans, need to revisit that Statue of Liberty that asks for the poor and the huddled masses, and the tired too. And what have we done? If we did soul searching, we'd know by this time we haven't eradicated poverty and homelessness. It's time for us to seriously do some soul searching. And then you ask, what would I say to politicians regarding these horrific standards we've allowed to be perpetuated here in America? I would say you ought to be ashamed. And certainly I thank you for this opportunity to share my testimony with you.
Thanks, Melaine. One of the things I am grateful for living in the capital region and serving in the capital region is the level of solidarity that exists. The issues of hunger and housing and the general issue of poverty increasingly is something that is not only born by people who are victims of the system, but the avenues of solidarity are growing and are tight and are getting tighter in the capital region and certainly in Schenectady. The second person that will share his testimony is a person that has dedicated a significant amount of his life to community engagement, but not simply to community engagement and to speaking about solidarity, but taking time to listen and be with and alongside the people who want freedom, people who want wellness, people who want safety, people who want their issues to be cared for. Sean Young is a co-founder of All of Us, a Black-led organization throughout the capital region coming out of Schenectady. And I am looking for and want to introduce to you my friend and colleague, Sean Young. And I think, Brother Young, you need to unmute yourself.
There we go.
Thank you.
Sorry
man.
about that. Still catching on with this. So hey everyone. Thank you, Amari, for asking me to be here. It's my pleasure to be on this call and to be in community with you all. I did write some things, but as I've heard people talking, I guess I got some things. I want to share a little bit about my history. My mother was born to a Native American woman in South Carolina, and my mother's family grew up poor before they moved up here to Albany to also be poor here. My father's family, my grandfather, great-grandfather from the island of Trinidad, and they were poor there, and they moved to New York and were poor here. They end up working some pretty decent jobs on my father's side, but many of them never actually were able to step out of the constraints of poverty. I grew up here in the capital region and the Hamilton Hill section of Schenectady and the Arbor Hill section of Albany, and spent some good times in East Flatbush, Brooklyn. And what all these places had in common is, as if you're noticing the theme, is they were poor and they were Black. When I think about poverty, I also think about intentionality behind poverty and like how we got to the place to where we are. And as I heard Ms. Gilmore speaking about our politicians and the shame that they should feel for not doing something, because these things are a matter of fact at this point. These are poverty at the intersection of race, at the intersection of crime, like all of these things intersect and are not accidental, right? We know how we got here. It's time, I think, that we begin as a community to take the steps necessary in order to get the change that we need. And that means that I may have some things to say to a politician, but I have more to say to my community. I have more to say to them. I have more organizing to do there. I have more action and activism to do there than I have to do down at City Hall or at the state ledge. Like, we want to get those things done, but I'm not going to rely on shame to get them done. These things, like I continue to say, are a matter of fact at this point. People are dying, our communities are suffering, and it's been going on for generations. I noticed that the panel discussion is described as the third Reconstruction. I want us to be mindful that the first two Reconstructions weren't all that they were cracked up to be, if you get what I mean. And what I mean is that the great potential that they were never actually realized. And not only were they never actually realized, they were all pushed back against, right? So after Reconstruction, we had Black codes, Jim Crow. We had so much tyranny. After the second Reconstruction of the Civil Rights era, which we ended up with our law and order type candidates, and we ended up with mass incarceration and the war on drugs. I think that we need to be mindful of that moving forward, or we will make the mistake of repeating all that again and not being wary that while we are on this side, while we are fighting together on this side of this, there are those that will continue to fight against us, and it will not stop. Their interest is not for the common good. Their interest is in their own pocket. Their interest does not lie where ours does, and I think we need to be mindful. And thinking about where we go from here and how it works, I guess I put the onus on everyone on this call to organize together, to work together, to find those in your community that are of like mind and share in community and build something together and fight back against. It's not enough to just sit on the sidelines and be on this call and agreeing with us. You must take action. It is absolutely imperative. Nothing happens without action. We've seen an uprising in 2020 in this country that we had not seen in decades and decades. And it was so much momentum on the side of the liberating fighter or the freedom fighters and the people trying to make change. The pendulum has begun to swing back the other way though. And I guess that's the theme of this for me, is that we are mindful that change does not happen just for the asking. Change happens with action. Change happens with standing up for what's right. Change happens with getting involved. Change happens with our demands. Change happens when we say it does, because the power is within the people. We've known this for a very long time. Wherever there's people, there's power. Fred Hampton, one of my favorite lines of his, wherever there's people, there is power, and we are that power. We need to realize that I will spend my life making sure that I reveal that power to my communities so that we get the change that we absolutely deserve. I am so grateful for being on this call with you all, so grateful for being shared in community with you all. And I look forward to, I know Joe, we've worked together on some things. Amari, we got so much more to do, but for those I don't know on this call, please reach out. Please reach out, please share. If we ain't in the same community, so what? You got something you want to talk about, you want to build on something, you got ideas, you want to share with my ideas, just reach out and we can make it happen. So I don't know if I'm at my time or not, but I'm gonna stop now. And I appreciate you all so much. And I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you.
People in this kind of work are never under time. There's always something to be said. There's always something to be learned. And if there's anything that I continue to learn in the capital region and in Schenectady, is that we are not simply full of opinions. We are wanting to know the truth. And in some scriptural traditions, truth is what sets you free. And that is why we're here, seeking to listen to lived experiences, because lived experiences are truth, and truth will set us free, but also wanting to learn from others. So this is also a joint learning opportunity. And as we continue that joint learning opportunity in the capital region, I want to bring on Tanner. They work with Vocal New York, and it is good now to listen to their lived experiences and truth. Tanner.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tanner. As you said, I'm a leader in Vocal Albany. Some of the biggest challenges I faced regarding housing and food insecurity, I spent a long time on the street. I spent a long time homeless, and I've been an addict my whole life. I moved down to this area to change that. And I wanted a change of scenery, because I would go to rehab, go back home and do the same thing over and over again. And I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. So I moved to this area. I managed to get sober. I have a full-time job. I have a car. I'm doing better in my life. Still, I cannot find a permanent place to live. I'm sleeping on my friend's couch right now with a full-time job. I have the money to get an apartment, but the landlords, the requirements landlords need, credit check. My credit's messed up because my student loans. That I should not be able to live in a home because of that. My background check. Yes, in the past, I haven't always been the greatest person. I'm making changes. I'm doing what I need to do to rectify everything I did in the past. Still, that's held against me. The income limits is insane. Some landlords want you to make 3 or 4 times the rent. Who makes that? If I made that, I wouldn't be trying to rent an apartment. I would go get a mortgage on a home. And it's just, it feels like they're trying to keep you down. You could try and do everything you can to better yourself, and the housing situation still keeps you down. And a lot of times that people can get so depressed over that they'll suffer, they'll start struggling at work. I struggle at work because I'm worried about my housing situation. I don't want to be, it's winter time. I don't want to be back on the street. It's a lot. I work in a homeless shelter, so I get the opportunity to help a lot of people get over these struggles. And a lot of the people that are there will come to me and ask advice and stuff. And yeah, you know what? That feels good. For a long time, I was a bad person. I was a drain on society. And now to turn around and use all those negative experiences to help people, that makes me feel a lot better about myself. And I want to give back to the community. On my way here, I saw a lady flying a sign. It's freezing outside. She said she needed shelter. So working in the shelter, I have connections, and I called the women's shelter and I gave her a ride and I got her a place to stay. So tonight, one more person's not going to stay in the cold. And that feels good that I was able to do that. Things officials should know. A lot of people, most people that are in office, I feel like, have not dealt with a lot of the struggles like this, have not seen homelessness. So when they're thinking about it, it's not really in the forefront of their mind because it's not something they personally experienced. So when I get a chance to talk about stuff like this, I hope that it's listened to and they can see how much it really affects people and what it feels like to be on this side, because it's not good. And having these situations, it's hard to be a positive member of society when I have to struggle to get a place to live. I have to struggle to find something to eat. How am I supposed to help the community when I'm dealing with that stuff? If housing was a human right like it should be, we would be a better as a society. When people aren't struggling, they could help everybody. But when you have to do all this stuff to help yourself first and you're not getting any help, what are we supposed to do? We're kept down. Misconceptions about people with housing struggles. You hear all the time, people talk, homeless people are homeless because they're lazy, they don't want to work. You know how hard it is to get a job with no address? When you fill out an application, you have to have an address. You have to have a phone number. Where am I going to get my mail if I don't have a house? How is a job going to call me back if I have no phone? It's not going to happen. It's not that people are lazy, it's that they have no opportunities. We need opportunities. Homelessness affecting my faith and relationships. A lot of times, especially during the winter, man, being on the street in the cold, it's really, really, really hard to have faith in anything. You can't focus on nothing except dealing with what you're dealing with. And it's hard to remain faithful when you're going through that. And relationship wise, like with family, a lot of other stuff, I feel like a lot of families, they personally haven't been in those situations. So they're not going to understand. They're going to go with the misconceptions. Oh, my son or daughter is homeless because they're lazy. They're not trying. They're an addict. No, when I was young, I didn't say, hey, you know what? I want to be a homeless drug addict. That was never on my mind. I had goals. I wanted to be a psychiatrist. I didn't want to be sleeping on the street. Things occurred in my life. I got messed up. I would like to fix those. And I would like to see other people be able to fix their struggles too. I don't like to see people struggle. If housing was guaranteed to everybody, as it should be, the world would be so much of a better place. We wouldn't have to see people struggle. You know how bad it hurts to see people on the street during the winter and know you want to do something? A lot of people see that and just go by. You could help. Get them into a shelter. Help them what's it going to cost you to take someone to the shelter? What's it going to cost you to tell people about things they could do to better themselves? Nothing. It's going to make you feel better. It's going to help them. And when they're helped, they're going to start making a positive influence on the community. So helping these situations helps everybody. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Tanner. And as we let that all sink in, I'd like to invite Jamel to join us. And he'll lead us in some music to help that sink in and seep into our minds. Jamel is an arts and culture coordinator and tri-chair of the New York State Poor People's Campaign, a national call for a moral revival. Let's listen, let's sing.
No more mourning, no more mourning, no more mourning after a while. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. Take my place with those who've loved and fought before. Take my place with those who've loved and fought before. No more sorrow, no more sorrow, no more sorrow after a while. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. Take my place with those who've loved and fought before. I know you're gonna miss me. I know you're gonna miss me. I know you're gonna miss me after a while. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. Take my place with those who've loved and fought before. Take my place with those who've loved and fought before. Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom after a while. Take my place. Oh, take my place. Oh, take my place. Oh, taking my place with those who loved and fought before.
Where State Street ends, going on east, turns into Central Avenue, and that is Albany County. And Albany County is served among many organizations by Focus Churches of Albany, and Fred Borer is the executive director, a good friend and a colleague in this work. So I leave you to my colleague, Fred Borer, with the rest of the introductions.
Thank you, Amari. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. We're here at Focus Churches of Albany, land that was cared for by Mohicans and the Mohawk. And we're a set of congregations. We offer a couple of food pantries, as well as a hot breakfast program. And we're gathered in the kitchen here, where many people come in for a hot breakfast. People who unfortunately have to decide whether to spend their money on groceries or on utilities or on rent or on healthcare. And we're a special place here at Focus Churches, because after people enjoy a nice hot meal here, they can walk half a block and be at the state capitol. They can walk half a block and be at the state legislative office building, where people with political power are making decisions about how our economic resources are distributed. And we are able, after having a nice warm meal, to go out there and to raise our voice to make sure that there is justice, and to quote our opening song, to set things right. We're so glad that one of our awesome breakfast guests, a member of our breakfast club, John, is able to share some of his wisdom, some of his words. He describes himself as just an ordinary guy, just an average person, but whose experience speaks to many of us. So we'll turn things over to John.
Cool. And I'm just going to share my screen. So give me 1 second.
Hello, everybody again. For me, the biggest challenge with being poor is finding people who are sincere in helping. Most people talk a lot about all the good they are going to do for you, and they don't follow through, leaving me holding the bag. It's happened so much that it made me resentful of a lot of these people who say they are going to help me. They think they know how to help, but they really can't. They aren't equipped to handle whatever it is they think they're addressing. And the people who make important decisions that affect us don't even know what we need, because they've never been out in the community speaking with homeless and hungry people. I want elected officials and the public who haven't experienced what I have to know, that they don't know what it's like to struggle for food and housing. If they want to know what it's like for people living in my conditions, then come out and hang out with me for a day. That's all it takes. You don't have to listen to me, but if you actually care like you say you do, then take action, please. Words are just words and don't do anything for us like actions do. I spent half my adult life in prison because there were things I needed and couldn't get. Like a lot of people, I broke rules when I was growing up poor and desperate. If you make a mistake, you face consequences for that, and I know that better than most. Since then, I've grown and learned how to reach out and put in the work for the things I need. I have seen when I at least attempt to do something right, doors open for me. I try to be honest and have no ulterior motives. Well, a better life. I'm not perfect, but I'll take good over bad any day. I have no ill will towards anybody because I know God will handle judgments and forgiveness. That's not my job. If you have the ability to help, then by all means extend your hand, but don't think you're giving a hand out, but a hand up. Whenever I'm helping people, I always want to give them a hand up. For me, the Breakfast Club is a hand up because there's something different going on here. At Focus, they warmly welcome you and treat you like a person with value deserving of food, and a lot of other things, because they do help with other things. There's a sense of community in the way people treat each other, even though I don't know anyone's name. A couple people, no, heavily good. It's not just you walk in and leave with what you want. A lot of solutions are made by rich people who assume we want to live like they do. I don't want anyone to think we're helpless people with no voices who need to be saved. I don't tell anyone what to do or how to live because that's not my place. It's all what you're personally willing to accept. If you're fine with your conditions, it's not my place to tell you you're not. But if you want to work hard to improve your conditions, I'll help you out, and society should too. We are going to suffer one way or another. Some people physically, some people mentally, but it's going to be a struggle that takes work. That's why faith is the number one F in my life. I have faith in a higher power and in myself. My faith is that you got to put in the work to get what you want in this life, and nothing is given. Grace is given, actually, freely. You have to have faith in yourself that you can get out of a bad situation. I control my own actions, but I know I don't control life. Just don't be discouraged and keep on working. If you can reach out a hand up people, those who want it will accept your help. Me for one. First.
We're so grateful for John for those great words that John just shared with us. You know, last month when we spoke to John about speaking today, I was very excited about that. And interestingly enough, he wasn't able to join us in person tonight because he has work to do. So he showed up a little bit earlier to record that special message because he wanted to share his wisdom with us. So we really appreciate John being with us. I just want to remind everyone, as Amari did earlier, that inside your Zoom screen there, you can go into the chat feature and share some of your thoughts. What are some of the opinions you have, some of the reactions you have, some of the great words that have been shared already by Melaine, Sean, Tanner, and John, some of the wonderful music we're hearing. If you can go in the chat, share what you're thinking, what you're feeling. We'd really like to know what's going on. And so we have another wonderful member of our Breakfast Club, a great neighbor, longtime resident here in Albany, and Margaret's here to share with us a bit about the wisdom that she wants to share with us on this message about how to be people of mercy and people of justice. Here's Margaret.
All the people who live on the streets and are like my family, and the biggest struggle for my family is they can't afford rent now, and landlords keep raising the prices. Rent is the biggest problem keeping people being homeless, and we need to stop letting landlords raise the prices of the rent. A lot of us are struggling every month to pay already because we can't afford how expensive it has gotten. I can't always afford to pay all for my utilities, and now they're closing to get shut off. I am on disability and Social Security, so when I applied for state benefits, they denied me every time I tried. Most of other needs are met by the Focus Food Pantry and Breakfast Club, but rent is concern struggle. For lots of people living outside they just need someone to tell them that they are jobs they can do and just give them a chance. The biggest problem with finding a job is they get ignored because people don't want to give them a chance to prove that they can do any job. Then we can never save money to rent an apartment. They think because of less education that they're in a group briefly with them. But people who have been homeless sometimes have more skills, and you would be good at the job. When you're struggling, all you think about is getting enough money for food. So we work hard for food. I am always encourage people I know who denies jobs to keep on trying. It is hard to get a job when people don't give you a shot because you are homeless and they think you can't do it. It's a hard struggle, but I believe if they keep on trying, they will find a good job. But for people who can't keep a job, you have to help those people. They deserve housing and food, everyone else, because those are human rights. People charge of hiring your resume to keep people like me do the job. Resumes don't tell you if I'm good at a job, just gives me time to do the job and show you're getting better at it. If you just give people a shot, homeless people can do good work and save enough money to get off the street. When you aren't making enough money to get housing, you spend that money on things you can't always afford, like alcohol and cigarettes. Everything else is getting too expensive. I haven't saved money at a bank because I can't go to the bank every time I get paid and put money in because I might have to use it soon on my bills. I would like to have a bank account, but I can't have one now. I have saved some money, but when COVID started, I couldn't go to work, and so I had to spend everything I had. Like I said before, the most important thing is getting these people jobs. People are always telling us, you can't do this, you can't do that. When we just need practice, we can help people get a job and save money by guaranteeing housing as human rights. People would be happier and could have their own things. I want people to have their dignity of owning their own things and showing what they have to their friends. To survive on the street, you have to have faith in friends who will help you out, and you will help them out. You have to be like family with the people who are living through the same trouble as anybody. When everybody else ignores you and won't talk to you, but people out there will always talk to you. And you always gotta have faith in yourself to survive.
We're so grateful. Thank you very much, Margaret, for those great words that inspire us to work for food justice and housing justice, and to make sure that this third reconstruction is about lifting all of us up and setting things right. Our next speaker here at Focus Churches, who'll be speaking at our Truth Commission, is an ordained minister. She serves as a part-time youth director at First Presbyterian Church here in Albany, which is one of the Focus congregations. We're very pleased to welcome Reverend Molly Dowell Baum. Reverend Molly.
Thank you, thank you. Oh, I'm definitely not too tall for this podium. Thank you very much. Thank you to Fred and Joe and all the other testifiers who are here today. Thank you, Margaret. I'm so glad to hear your story. The first time I can remember knowing that I was poor was about age 2 or 3. I have this memory of holding tightly to my mom's hand as we went to the basement of the doctor's office. She spoke to a lady, and I remember my mom crying and hearing the word collection, which sounded scary the way they spoke of it. The lady had a gravelly voice, which made it sound even more intimidating to my young ears. My parents worked in service careers, pastor, social worker, public school teachers. As I grew, I watched my parents carefully choose which bills to pay and which ones could wait, a skill I later had to use myself on numerous occasions. My dad, let me skip that part. I learned later that the preschool I attended and the healthy foods my mom lovingly prepared for us came from Head Start and WIC, Women, Infants, and Children, 2 government programs, government-funded programs to provide quality education and nutrition to children under 5. All I knew then was that my parents took good care of me. I loved that at my preschool, we had miniature lunch tables that were just the right size for kids, and we got to pour our own milk from a pitcher. Various times in my life, I have lived right around the poverty line, when I've been a student, a graduate student, and some other times I will share. At times I have qualified for services, but mostly I've been in that space right above the line where you still can't afford all the bills, but you don't qualify for services because you make too much. There are so many of us who are facing difficult choices every day. My family is part of the 140 million people in the United States who exist below the poverty line or in that space right above it. And 140 million, that is almost half of the population of our country. We are the richest country. We are a very wealthy nation, and those were numbers collected before the pandemic. Fast forward, 30 years later, my wife and I are both ordained clergy. My wife, Robin, was the solo pastor of a relatively progressive United Church of Christ congregation in very conservative Northwest Iowa. And my full-time job at that time was caring for our preschooler and baby. My wife, Robin, is a transgender woman, and she came out as such, as transgender, in 2018 while serving that rainbow flag flying congregation that claimed to welcome all. Soon after, she suffered discrimination, hate, and eventually job loss from that UCC congregation. And suddenly, we had only my extremely part-time job teaching ESL to refugees at the local community house to support us. We could no longer afford our mortgage, and our health insurance costs skyrocketed. We did qualify for all the services though, and we were very grateful to use them at that time. We moved to Albany in January 2020. We stayed in my wife Robin's parents' home for 6 months. We know that is a privilege not everyone has access to. At the community house where I used to work in Iowa, we would have been marked down as unhoused, as homeless during those times. We were grateful to access WIC in New York State and health insurance on the marketplace at very low cost to us, but we still made too much for childcare assistance so that I could have a full-time job or SNAP. I got a 12-hour part-time job at the First Presbyterian Church where I'm honored to work. And we bought a house in Albany. My wife got a better paying job temporarily doing contact tracing. And with that job change, our health insurance costs skyrocketed. And to such a point, we could no longer afford everything. We couldn't go without our meds or weekly individual and family therapy sessions. But after all, and especially not after all the trauma we had experienced and continue to experience during the pressures of ongoing pandemic. But I knew we could cut our food expenses and then just scrape by. So I started visiting our local food pantry, which is where we live. It's Blessed Sacrament in Albany, and you're allowed to go once a month. And then I knew the focus churches, which I was a part of, our family's congregation, which is First Church, the Reformed Church, as well as the church that I work at, First Presbyterian. And I knew that the focus churches had a breakfast club, that we could get hot breakfast and sack lunch sent out the door 3 days a week. So I figured out how to get myself there after dropping off my kids at school and then before going about my other daily tasks. I'm part of a Facebook group called Buy Nothing, which seeks to nurture free economies within local communities. I highly recommend it. And that's where I learned about more free resources. I discovered that Food Not Bombs gives out leftover organic veggies from the grocery store, the co-op, and also cooked meals on Monday nights. And Feed Albany gives out cooked meals on Wednesday nights. So we could go after a busy day of two parents working, picking up kids, and it felt like we had takeout because someone was cooking for us. And the Buy Nothing page was also how I first accessed the mass food distribution sponsored by Catholic Charities, the Food Bank, and other local groups. A member of the Buy Nothing group posted information and that volunteers from the group could pick up a box and deliver it to your house if needed. We only have one car. At that time, I was working 2 jobs. In addition to youth director at First Presbyterian, I worked the 2020 census. I didn't always have time to go myself to a food distribution. So once a month or so, I would request a food box, and like magic, it would appear on my doorstep. Then I noticed some folks from the Poor People's Campaign, for which I was already a part of and we had been a part of in Iowa. They are volunteering at the mass distributions, and I saw PPC flyers in my food box. And I had the bravery to say, like, hey guys, I got the flyer, I get the boxes. And it was so great. It said, you are not alone, as well as a lot of other information. Now that my family is a bit better stabilized, I drive our car at least one morning a month to a food distribution. I get there early and help pack the boxes. I talk to folks waiting in their cars about the Poor People's Campaign. And then I load a box for my family and several other boxes for friends and neighbors who don't have the time or the transportation. And I deliver them like magic to their doorsteps. A common misconception other people may have is that folks who are housing or food insecure are those other poor people over there. No, we are your friends and neighbors. We are your family members, or the people that you work with, that you walk by each day. And you never know when it could also be you. Honestly, I am a bit intimidated sharing with family members or even members of my faith community that our family is food insecure. I don't relish being pitied, and I fear that people will judge us. When we know most of us will need some sort of help at some point in life, and it's vital to show mercy and help to our friends and neighbors in times of need. But what my family needs more than charity is a society where housing and food are guaranteed human rights. If my wife and I and all of us didn't have to sell our labor in order to earn the right to take up space on this planet, and even then, poverty wages won't put food on the table, we could freely pursue the careers and vocations for which we are uniquely gifted and for which our world has great need. Plus, I would be a less stressed out parent and spouse. I would have patience, more patience. I'm sure I'd still lose my patience. I would have more patience because of less stress and more time for my family, for my community, for music, for play and rest. And my mind, body, spirit would be more healthy and thus able to enjoy this life and love others more fully. Thank you for listening.
So I'm going to put some of these lyrics in the chat. Thank you so much, Molly, and for all the testifiers. I would love to invite people on Facebook and people in this Zoom meeting to write their reflections if you have any questions. And also, if anything is coming up for you, we're going to create some space to reflect with one another. And I think one theme that I heard is that we're not heavy. We're going to lift each other up. We are not heavy. Scarcity is a myth. We live in a world of abundance. And so we're going to sing about that with one another. This song is written by Fire Rose Touré. She was a civil rights activist and the first Black female judge in Alabama and has done a lot of work. So I encourage everyone. She's amazing. She's an amazing artist and organizer and human. So I recommend everyone researching Fire Rose Touré. But we're going to sing this song. I'm going to lift my neighbor up. They are not heavy. So I invite you to sing with me. I'm gonna lift my neighbor up. They are not heavy. I'm gonna lift my neighbor up. They are not heavy. I'm gonna lift my neighbor up. They are not heavy. If I don't lift them up, if we don't lift them up, if we don't lift them up, we will fall down. I'm gonna lift my people up. They are not heavy. I'm gonna lift my people up. They are not heavy. I'm gonna lift my people up. They are not heavy. If we don't lift them up, if we don't lift them up, if we don't lift them up, we will fall down. How about our children? I'm gonna lift our children up. They are not heavy. We're gonna lift the children up. They are not heavy. We're gonna lift our children up. They are not heavy. If we don't lift them up, if we don't lift them up, if we don't lift them up, we will fall down. I'm gonna lift my neighbor up. They are not heavy. I'm gonna lift our neighbors up. They are not heavy. We're gonna lift our neighbors up. They are not heavy. If we don't lift them up, if we don't lift them up, if we don't lift them up, we will fall down. We're gonna lift each other up. We are not heavy. We're gonna lift each other up. We are not heavy. We're gonna lift each other up. We are not heavy. If we don't lift us up, if we don't lift us up, if we don't lift this up, fall down. I'm going to read some responses in this chat. There are lots of love for the testifiers who shared our stories. We are shifting the narrative by shifting the narrators tonight. I feel very moved. Lots of comments about thank you for sharing truth and shaming the ruling class. That is correct. Just lots of thank you, lots of calls to organize with one another. Also, this wonderful comment that, we wish that this recording, everyone's testimony, would be sent to every legislator, and that this was broadcast on the street and all across the world. And when we left from the bottom, everybody rises. I agree with that so much. And that's something that we're doing here tonight. So thank you all so much for being with us tonight as we create space to hear each other's stories and really share with one another and create this new media by us and for us. So I really appreciate everyone being here tonight. So I'm going to pass it to West in this moment.
Thank you so much, Pauline, and to all our testifiers and to all of you for receiving these stories and responding and helping us all to be informed and pointed in this direction forward together. I have the honor now to introduce a couple speakers who are with us who represent this bigger, broader movement beyond the bounds of New York State that we are so blessed to be a part of, who represent leaders of organizations who are on the front lines of responding to food insecurity and homelessness and housing insecurity in the context of building this broader movement to take on all of these interlocking oppressions. So we're going to hear tonight from Savina Martin with the National Union of the Homeless and Lindsay Jordan with Fed Up. Savina is a friend and mentor of mine over the years. She grew up in Roxbury, Massachusetts during the height of social and civil unrest after the 1968 assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. From 1986 to 1990, she was the president of the Greater Boston Union of the Homeless, and she was also the former executive director of Wings, Inc. for Unhoused Mothers, which was an abandoned takeover home that came out of the National Union of the Homeless takeover campaign in the 80s. Currently, she serves on the National Advisory and Clergy Council of the National Union of the Homeless, as well as the Standing Committee of the University of the Poor, and she's a tri-chair of the Massachusetts Poor People's Campaign. And she also writes spoken word poetry and is one of many revolving preachers who you will see at Freedom Church of the Poor, which, if folks don't know, happens on Sunday evenings at 6 p.m. on the Eastern Time on the Cairo Center Facebook page, and is focusing in this period on the winter offensive with the National Union of the Homeless. And in addition to Savina, we will hear from Lindsay Jordan, who is another leader in this network of the Poor People's Campaign and other organizations around the country. She's an organizer with NC Raise Up, which is the North Carolina chapter of the Fight for 15 and a Union. And today she's here representing Fed Up. They call a political food drive, which is really doing groundbreaking work, both meeting the needs of people who are food insecure in the context of organizing the kind of movement that we need. So we're really grateful to you both for being here tonight to share some of your wisdom and experience with us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Savina.
Thank you so much, Reverend West, and to this entire platform for having us here today. I just enjoy being with my New York State siblings, so it's definitely a joy to be here again. I'm not going to really do that much talking tonight. This has been very, very powerful truth commissions that must go on, right? Through the summer, through the winter, through the spring and the fall. It is our duty to bring our message to the masses. And yes, as a part of the original Union of the Homeless, we reestablished ourselves during the 2019 Poor People's Campaign Congress in Washington, D.C. And since that time, we have been slowly mobilizing, right? Now hear that, slowly mobilizing, but at the pace where we right now do not have the capacity, given the nature of and the danger in the times that in uncertainty in the times we are living in today. So as we're talking tonight, we still want to bear in mind that it is movement time, right? And we must band together, because we know at scale the amount of people that are on the verge of eviction and homelessness. How are we going to cast the net to mobilize, identify, and build this movement to upend poverty? It is our human right to have a home and food. So that said, each week at Freedom Church of the Poor, which we've collaborated this year with, and remember, it's just not the National Union of the Homeless. This year's winter offensive that launched on November 7th on through the Martin Luther King's birthday is a winter offensive that belongs to all of us, simply because, as this Truth Commission is titled, for our highlighting our fight, our plight, and our insight. Each week we are bringing together leaders from all over the country, and we are documenting in film, right, by video, the framing, right? And we're being intentional and deliberate this year in framing the different talks. When we started 5 weeks ago, right, November 7th, we had Chris Caruso, who came in and did the framing. So what we're going to do right now is show a clip. It's about 8 minutes and 21 seconds. But what that does, it frames where we're at today. And the work that y'all are doing, right? All of us are doing this work. But we've got to go and dig a little bit deeper because of what we're up against, right? And use everything at our disposal, right? The Six Panther Peas, right? We're utilizing already protest, and we're utilizing already the press, and we're also drawing on lessons from history, right? The Black Panthers, the civil rights movement, the third Reconstruction, because we're not going to go any further without understanding the history that we evolved from. So let's show this clip, which we will build on each week. And then we can talk about it and you can show it at will. So enjoy.
The Supreme Court ended the Center for Disease Control's nationwide eviction moratorium at the end of August, and a further, more limited federal eviction moratorium expired on September 30th. We are now in the eviction avalanche, but it will not be televised, and it will not be discussed in the national media unless and until we force that discussion.
We used to encourage people to come to eviction court to see what was going on, because in eviction court, sometimes 80 families were evicted in 1 week. And it's a small county, 167,000 people or something like that.
This was churning, and it was shocking to people to see that this was going on in their town. There'd been a rapid changeover in the nature of the relationships of people living next door to each other in this town over 15 or 20 years. So a lot of the people who were part of the housing rights group were tenants, and their families had not been tenants as they were growing up. But because of the loss of jobs in manufacturing and the transition of the housing to become rental stocks, so that it transitioned from a town that was almost 100% owner-occupied housing to a town that was 50% rental. And now it's a revolving door.
We know that there's not a county in our country where a person working full-time for the federal minimum wage can afford a 2-bedroom apartment. The median rent has gone up by 20% in the last year. So a $1,000 apartment 12 months ago is now a $1,200 apartment. This is at the same time when the average median wage has not increased in 50 years.
This was actually a pretty typical day at eviction court. There's a lot of people. Most of these people are waiting for their trials. And you notice that most of the faces are light because most of the county is white. 93% of this county is white. This woman who came to eviction court, she's sitting in one of the evictees' 2 seats. See, this is divided. This side is the tenant, this side is the landlord. And so the landlord has a lawyer with him, nice tie and all that jazz. And the tenant has her 2 children. Her boyfriend, who she shared an apartment with, broke up and he was paying the rent. And she had no income, no family, and nothing to rely on except the mercy of the eviction court, which is merciless. They come up, some of them say, I work full time, but I don't get enough money to pay for my rent. Some people say, I just had an emergency. My son had to go to the hospital, so I had to pay, instead of rent, I had to pay for a hospital bill.
There were more reasons than you can imagine. You know, from somebody getting sick to somebody getting married and moving out, for some roommate who skipped town, to, you know, just a million reasons. But the thing is, a rent is something that's so basic to your survival, and it can be affected by something as tiny as a flat tire that costs you your job, or something as major as an abusive spouse.
This is the judge, and he's admonishing her for bringing her 2 kids to court. And her response was, but I don't have any place to bring them. And the judge said, it's your responsibility. She was evicted, which means in the court sense that a deputy of the court, policeman or bailiff, is charged with removing the furniture from the house. And the lawyers are like parasites. They're like fleas or maggots or something on a dead body. And they make $250 for every client they handle. All they got to do is say, just tell what happened, landlord. The landlord tells what happened, and the judge says, okay. Then asks the tenant, is that true? And of course, it's almost always true, but it's not just at all.
We know that when renters go to court, that there is no help for them in the courts. In Oklahoma and Hawaii, there were studies done showing 95% of all cases in landlord-tenant court go to the landlord. A recent study in Kansas City found that 99.7% of all cases in landlord-tenant court are decided in favor of the landlord.
Also, how woefully unprepared poor and working people are to deal with these institutions, so that not only don't they have the basic rights of tenants and landlords, but they don't have information about even the process of the eviction.
That's one reason why this Freedom School Committee was started, to help people, because everybody was related to everybody else, so that even if it wasn't you undergoing an eviction, you might have a relative or a friend that you could help out if you knew more.
This is Dorothy Flowers.
She was just a good person who knew that she couldn't do this by herself. And so when she found out there were other people organizing, she jumped right in.
She was a tenant, and her sewage system backed up 8 times, which she's an older woman. And so she had to clean it up herself. Then she wrote a complaint against the housing authority, and they evicted her. And not only did they evict her, but they had a temporary restraining order issued against her because she was so strongly spoken on the issue of housing and rentals. And that's me over on the other end. Also, both of us have these blue pamphlets in our hand.
So part of the landlord-tenant rights handbook tells you all the things that you're supposed to have if you rent a property. You know, you should make sure it has electricity or plumbing. And so these are just basic things that, as people kept saying, why don't we know this? Why don't we know that we have a right to good housing, to hot water, to any water, you know, to plumbing, all these things.
The President Biden could, with a stroke of a pen, declare an eviction moratorium. A similar one during the Great Depression was upheld by the Supreme Court in 1934. It's within his power to do. He has not done so. He will not do so unless there's massive pressure from the ground up to dramatize this problem, to show what's actually happening that's currently being swept under the rug by the government, by the media, and by the courts.
And I'll end with, this is why in this moment, right now, in history, we must mobilize for June 18th, 2022. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Savina, for sharing your wisdom and that information. And yes, welcome, Lindsay. We'll turn it over to you now. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, everyone. Good to be with y'all. Thanks for having me. Thank you so much for everyone's testimony, and thank you, Savina, for your wisdom. The fact that these stories so closely mirror the stories I hear every day in North Carolina means that we've got work to do. As Reverend West said, I'm here representing Fed Up, the political food distribution project of survival that's led by Raise Up, the North Carolina Poor People's Campaign, and Carolina Jews for Justice here in Durham, North Carolina. Fed Up started in spring 2020, just as the pandemic began. We knew that people in our community were suffering, and we stepped in to fill a need the government should have been taking care of. For nearly 2 years now, we've run a food distribution project out of a parking lot in the Lakewood neighborhood of Durham. We mainly distribute fresh produce, which is a need that's often not met. As I said, we run it out of a parking lot. This parking lot is right next door to a grocery store, and the irony is definitely not lost on us. One day, 2 Raise Up members, Tremaine and Cherie, low-wage workers themselves, went over to the grocery store to grab a bite to eat during the distribution. They were talking to the cashier. Oh, sorry, I will slow down. They were talking to the cashier, and the cashier asked if she would be able to come and grab a bag of food on her break. Tremaine said that she was confused for a second, and then she got angry. Angry at the fact that the cashier was in a store stocked with food, yet the store didn't pay her enough to buy that food for herself and her family. The situation with food insecurity and hunger is bad in Durham, just as in North Carolina, just as in New York, just as in the country as a whole. Before the pandemic in Durham County, it was reported that 1 in 4 Latino and 1 in 6 Black residents reported skipping meals or eating less food because they didn't have enough money. Everyone here knows how the pandemic made this worse as people lost their incomes. However, I want to be clear that this isn't the only need Fed Up stepped in to fill. The 3 goals of Fed Up are 1, to keep bellies full, but also 2, to organize, and 3, to educate. The second 2 goals are extremely important to talk about because they're what make us what we call a project of survival, which is what I want to spend a little bit of time talking about. We draw the term project of survival from Black Panther Party and the Kensington Welfare Rights Union. One of the projects of survival that inspired Fed Up was the Panthers' Free Breakfast for Kids, which fed 10,000 children every day before school. But projects of survival, of course, don't just have to be about food. They're anything that helped the poor survive in the absence of care from the state. Free Breakfast for Kids was one of about 60 projects of survival created by the Panthers. They also had free clothing, free busing to prisons, free ambulance services, healthcare clinics, and more. In Fed Up, we studied the Panthers because it's a project that won their demand. They made and won the demand for the government to fund free breakfast for school kids in public schools. There's a quote by Huey P. Newton that I wanted to share. I'm going to read it here. He said of the Panthers programs, quote, all these programs satisfy the deep needs of the community, but they are not solutions to our problems. That is why we call them survival programs, meaning survival pending revolution. We say that the survival program of the Black Panther Party is like the survival kit of a sailor stranded on a raft. It helps him to sustain himself until he can get completely out of that situation. So the survival programs are not answers or solutions, but they will help us to organize the community around a true analysis and understanding of their situation, end quote. In Fed Up and in all projects of survival, we have to be really crystal clear about this. Fed Up is not going to solve hunger in Durham. All of the food banks will not solve hunger in Durham. We have this phone bank that we do on the Sunday after the distribution. One of my favorite conversations I heard about from one of our volunteers was a woman gave them feedback that the tomatoes in her bag were rotten. The volunteer, of course, deeply apologized. We don't want to give people rotten tomatoes. But they also used it as an opportunity to talk about why Fed Up is not enough. This random group of people who come together with the best of intentions, but maybe not the most expertise in food distribution, shouldn't be the ones responsible for meeting the needs of their community. It's the responsibility of the state to ensure the welfare of the people. This is what Fed Up and Project Survival can make inroads in doing. Organizing poor people around the contradictions that exist in this country and the world. In the richest nation in the world, a nation that throws away more food than it would take to feed all the population. As we say at the beginning of every distribution, it's frankly pretty messed up that we need to be doing this. As Pauline said, scarcity is a myth. We live in a world of abundance. Within Fed Up, we take up this question and we take up the question of why projects of survival are what we need, not things like charity or mutual aid. Projects of survival are about base building. They work to meet our immediate needs while strengthening the organization and coordination of our class. Projects of survival are a tactic of the working class that's rooted in how we think things are going to change. They're a tool for the organization of our class. We've had a lot of successes in Fed Up, and we've had a lot of challenges. Sourcing fresh produce every week is definitely difficult, but the real challenge lies in this work of building the permanent organization of the poor and dispossessed. I wanted to end by sharing this list. It's from our experiences over the last 2 years. We've compiled this list called Fed Up Advice for Organizers. It's adapted from a resource from the SEIU 1199 Organizing Conference in 1985. And I'd like to share it with y'all, and I hope it'll be helpful. Number 1, Get close to the recipients and crew. When I say crew, I'm talking about our volunteers. Our recipients and our crew definitely overlap though. Get close to the recipients and crew, stay close to the recipients and crew. So it's about constant communication and building deep relationships. We should work to know the crew and recipients' kids' names, where they go to worship, where they go to school, things about their lives. Getting close means identifying those that are leaders in their community. We should ask, do we deliver to people that have a following on their street? Number 2, tell recipients and crew it's their project and then behave that way. So we want our recipients to go past the charity model as well as and begin to see their participation in other parts of the project as necessary for the project to survive. FedUp is a base of operation. The most active way to participate in the 3 base organizations is to participate in FedUp. FedUp is the school that raises our leaders. We need recipients coming to phone banking and to distributions to build up their leadership. Number 3, don't do for the crew and recipients what they can do for themselves. We have to identify the potential for leadership. We should ask ourselves, which recipients and crew are thinking, how do I make sure that my other neighbors on my street get food? Or are there more deliveries available? These are the type of real questions that let us know that someone is wanting to organize in their community. The person has the potential to be something like a neighborhood captain, someone that can partner with us to canvass in their neighborhood. This is community doing for ourselves what we can do for ourselves. We have to organize these leaders so they bring the people around them toward FedUp. Number 4, FedUp's function is to assist recipients and crew in making a positive change in their lives. This project is not a fee for service. It's the collective experience of people in struggle. When people ask for more support than FedUp provides, our job isn't to connect everyone to every service they need. Our work is to agitate them to begin to see that the services they need don't exist, and that the only thing that is going to get us out of this poverty and this death-producing system is coming together and fighting together. This one is one of my favorites, number 5. Recipients and crew are made of clay, not glass. As organizers and leaders of FedUp, we engage in the art and science of what is possible. We refuse the patronizing discourse that says that poor people are too busy, ignorant, and don't have the ability to organize a project to survival and a movement to end the conditions they face. We have to push people to get more deeply involved. Number 6, don't be afraid to ask recipients and crew to build the project, and don't be afraid to confront them when they don't. We have to ask them to build this project, and we shouldn't be afraid to push them to do so. To confront means that when we see leadership potential, we ask them to show up as leaders instead of sitting on the sidelines. Number 7, don't spend your time organizing workers who are already organizing themselves. Let's seek to organize the unorganized. Relationship building is about listening to cues that people give you that reveal an inroad to building organizing possibilities with this person. These cues never sound like, how can I help organize this project? Instead, the cues usually sound something like, I can't come on Sunday because I'm helping out at my church dinner. When someone says something like this, we should hear what they are actually saying. I'm a leader in my church. How do I get my church involved in this project? We should consistently invite people to the many aspects of the project. Number 8, the working class builds cells for its own defense. Identify them and recruit their leaders. As we get to know the emergent leaders, recipients, and crew of FedUp, we will discover that our people are leaders of community associations, the PTA, school groups, organizations, and faith centers. We have to engage these leaders and connect them to leaders of our base organizations. This next one I see as the crux of why we call ourselves FedUp. Number 9, anger is there before you are. Channel it, don't diffuse it. Channeled anger builds a fighting organization. We should agitate, agitate, agitate. We have to remind our base that it's not enough to be fed up with the conditions we face. We have to organize and mobilize our people to flex our power and win our demands. Number 10, recipients and crew know the risks. Don't lie to them. Power is never granted, it must be taken. We only get what we're organized to take. And we plan to take back our dignity, our humanity, and everything we need to thrive. And the dying mule kicks the hardest, so the struggle won't go forward without risks. Number 11, every event is showtime. Communicate energy, excitement, urgency, and confidence. Every time we deliver, phone bank, set up, distribute, canvas, and more, we should be ready for an opportunity to organize. To do this, we must bring an authentic presence to deepen relationships among all involved. Number 12, there is enough oppression in recipient and crew lives not to be oppressed by organizers. At Fed Up, we organize across lines of difference. Each of these lines contains both power and oppression, and we all have the capacity in our intersectional identities for both power and oppression. Let's lift our people up, they're not heavy. When we lift from the bottom, everyone rises. This one I could probably learn from, and I'm getting ready to wrap up. 13, organizers talk too much. Most of what you say is forgotten. In every conversation, talk 20%, listen 80%. Organizing is about listening and asking questions. Number 14, communicate to recipients and crew that there is no salvation beyond their own power. When we're united, we can beat systems of oppression. You have to believe that, and so do they. All power is with the people. Like Willie Baptist up there in New York says, the rulers of the society are but a flea on the giant's back. We are the giant. We must get into step, organize ourselves together so that we can wake up and flick that little flea off our collective backs and win our freedom, liberation, and peace. Number 15, don't underestimate our people. We lose when we don't put our people into struggle. Everyone has the potential ability to be an organizer. We must mine for the gold in each person. Everybody in, nobody out. There's a role for everyone in the work. We have to plug our people in, develop one another's leadership, and trust each other and our organizing. So that's our list. And Fed Up is learning, and we're growing alongside these many projects of survival that make up the organization of the poor and dispossessed that's embodied in the Poor People's Campaign. I just want to thank y'all so much for letting me learn from y'all today and to share the collective wisdom of our project. And I will definitely share this list. Thank you so much.
I had to catch my breath after that. Thank you so much, Lindsay. That was incredibly powerful. Thank you so much, Savina. That was incredibly powerful. We're grateful to learn and hear the lessons that you've learned over your experiences and time organizing as the National Union of Homeless and as Fed Up. And I know I can speak for myself, and I know the others that I organize with, we're going to be taking all those lessons to heart and bringing those here to upstate New York. A number of our folks talked about moving from story to action, right? And we know that, as he's been mentioned, Willie Baptist is a mentor to so many of us. He said before that movements begin with the telling of untold stories. And so that's part of what we're doing here, starting by sharing our stories. And so I want to thank our testifiers for their courage and bravery in sharing their stories. But we know that that's just that very first step. So we're going to take action together. And I'm going to talk about a few opportunities to do that, that you can do wherever you are. A few things are going to be focused on the capital region, but there are other ways to connect all around the country and state and New York State. So Pauline, I think, is going to share some slides for me. Yeah. You can go to that third slide right away. That one right there. So the Labor Religion Coalition and Capital Region Poor People's Campaign were really honored to partner with two critical food organizations in the capital region, the Focus Churches of Albany and the Schenectady Community Ministries. These are long-standing collaborations of congregations who, the distinction that I find, they're not just food pantries. The people who have been part of these organizations have understood the need that we can't just keep giving out food and expect things to eventually change, right? They've asked the deep questions. Why is it that when we keep giving out so much food, hunger persists in our communities? And so they're asking these questions and taking steps forward to organize and advocate and move towards justice ministries. So if you are in the capital region and you are not familiar or connected to either of these organizations, I encourage you to do that right away. Someone's going to drop in the chat a link tree that will have a whole set of links. We'll also send it out via email to everyone who RSVP'd for this event afterwards, and that'll connect you directly to these organizations. So if you are in Albany, the Focus churches are right downtown. And if you're in Schenectady, they have a large food pantry and base of operations, but also their programs operate throughout the city. Next slide, please. If you're not part of an organization, I hope you're inspired to join one today. So obviously many of us are part of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. You can go to poorpeoplescampaign.org, learn more about what we're doing to not just remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s last campaign, but carry that work forward. And that is a huge task. We're organizing in over 40 states. If you are in New York, I would encourage you to go to nyspppc.org and you can learn about the work that we're doing here. The organization I'm part of, the Labor Religion Coalition of New York State, you can go to laborreligion.org. We're the ones putting on and coordinating this series of truth commissions, and we're an anchor organization of the New York State Poor People's Campaign. So if you have not heard of us, if this is the first time you've come across us, you can check us out and get involved in our work there. And specifically for folks in the Capital Region, the Capital Region Poor People's Campaign Committee meets next Tuesday, a week from today at 6:30. So there's a link to RSVP to that. If you're anywhere in the Capital Region, within like 100 miles of our state capital in Albany, we invite you to join that virtual meeting next week, and we'll be talking about what's on tap for the year ahead. And then we're so grateful to be joined by Savina Martin from the National Union of the Homeless. They are organizing homeless union chapters all around the country as well. And it's critical that we learn from their work. As Savina mentioned, we're in the midst of the winter offensive, where through this holiday season, the narrative about charity is on full blast. We're just overwhelmed by it. And that is coming from, for many people, a very good-hearted place, but we know that charity is not going to get us out of these crises, that what we need is to organize for power for poor people to win what we need. And then we heard, and thank you so much, Lindsay Jordan, for sharing with us about the work of FedUp North Carolina, FedUp NC. You can learn more about their work through Facebook. That link is included in the link tree as well. And a couple other organizations that were mentioned by our testifiers that I don't have on the slide, unfortunately, but Sean Young is a leader in All of Us Community Action Group, and Tanner spoke as a member of Vocal New York. These are two critical partnering organizations. All of Us is primarily focused in the Capital Region. Vocal is actually a statewide organization. So if you're not familiar with either of those groups and want to learn more, again, go to that link tree and you'll find more. Next slide, please. This is part of our series of truth commissions. And as of today, you can now RSVP and register for our next truth commission, which will be in February. It will be oriented around healthcare struggles, the need for universal healthcare, the need for access to services wherever people may be. And it will be primarily focused, our testifiers will be coming from the Hudson Valley and probably New York City as well. But you can go to this website, it's also in the link tree, and RSVP for that event. Starting today, please spread the word. If you found tonight's program powerful and helpful, would encourage you to spread the word on our upcoming truth commissions. And next slide, our last slide. June 18th, 2022, as Savina mentioned, the Mass Poor People's and Low Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington. In the Poor People's Campaign, we don't do concise titles. But this is an important opportunity in the coming year. We were actually supposed to do this last year, but unfortunately the pandemic put a kibosh on a lot of in-person gatherings, but we are hopeful and optimistic that things will improve to the degree that we can have the kind of mass gathering we need so that the voices of the poor and dispossessed the 140 million poor and low-income people that Molly mentioned, united together in action, will go to our leaders and demand what we need. There is currently legislation called Build Back Better, and that is barely scratching the surface of what we need. I appreciate the title, Build Back Better, but we need a complete moral revolution of values from the bottom up to transform our society to address these crises of hunger, housing insecurity, healthcare, the environmental crisis, and end to militarism and the war economy. So there is a link to begin RSVPing for that. There will be buses from all over the country and all over New York that you'll be able to join for June 18th. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Molly one more time. I'm going to come up here and close us out with a song. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening.
My assistant behind me, Annalise. Okay, we're gonna sing, what song are we gonna sing?
Everybody got a right to live.
Everybody's got a right to live, and this child did that at her school talent show last year. Right. So the word, right. So one of the things the Build Back Better Act is doing is to permanently do the child tax credit, the payments to families. So this is one of the children who would be helped by that. So the words are, you can sing along at home. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to live. And some of us will be going to the Capitol next Monday to go to jail to demand, we got to get these voting rights, we've got to get the Build Back Better plan over the finish line. Ready? Should we clap? Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to live.
Everybody's got a right to live.
To live.
Everybody's got a right to learn.
To learn.
Everybody's got a right to breathe.
To breathe.
Everybody's got a right to dream.
To dream.
Everybody's got a right to.
Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to live. Thank you, everyone. And